The price of betrayal. David never intended to cheat. At least, that's what he told himself the first time it happened. It started as harmless conversation at the office. Olivia, the new marketing consultant, was sharp, funny, and confident. She had a way of making everyone around her feel interesting, and David found himself lingering by her desk more often than he should. It was innocent at first, just jokes, shared frustrations about work, and the occasional lunch. But lines blurred when laughter turned into deep conversations, when fleeting touches became intentional. He loved his wife, Emily. He really did. They had built a life together over the past 10 years, filled with quiet mornings, shared dreams, and late-night conversations. But somewhere along the way, routine had replaced excitement. Emily had grown more preoccupied with their 2 young children, and David had buried himself in work. Their conversations revolved around schedules, groceries, and finances. Love was there, but passion had faded. The first time he kissed Olivia, it was after an office party. They were both a little tipsy, standing outside beneath the city lights. She had laughed at something he said, and when she looked up at him, her eyes full of something he hadn't felt in years, desire, he gave in. One moment of weakness turned into another, then another. Soon, they were sneaking around, making excuses, finding stolen moments where they could. But affairs never stay hidden forever. One evening, as David walked through the front door, he immediately knew something was wrong. Emily sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, her expression unreadable. The air was thick with tension. Who is she? Her voice was calm, too calm. David's stomach dropped. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. She didn't need him to confirm anything. The evidence was already there, messages he had forgotten to delete, a late-night hotel charge, a whispered phone call Emily had overheard by accident. How long? She asked, her eyes filled with something he had never wanted to see, hurt and betrayal. Emily, Ayo. How long, David? She repeated, her voice breaking. He swallowed hard. 6 months. She closed her eyes, nodding as if trying to steady herself against the weight of his confession. And was it worth it? David wanted to say no, to tell her that nothing could compare to what they had built together. But how could he expect her to believe that when his actions had already spoken for him? Emily stood, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. I gave you everything, David. I stood by you when you lost your job, when we struggled to make ends meet. I carried our children, sacrificed my dreams so we could build a life together. And this is what I get. Tears burned his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. She wiped her face, her sadness quickly hardening into something else, resolve. I want you to leave. Tonight. David felt his world crash around him. He pleaded, swore it was over, promised to fix what he had broken. But some wounds cut too deep to be healed by mere words. He packed a bag that night, the silence of the house unbearable. His children were asleep, unaware that by morning, their father would no longer be there to kiss them goodbye before school. He took one last look at Emily, hoping for a sign that she might reconsider. She didn't. As he stepped out into the night, a crushing weight settled in his chest. He had traded a decade of love and trust for fleeting passion, and now, standing alone under the same city lights where it all began, he finally understood the true cost of betrayal. And it was a price far greater than he was prepared to pay. Story number 2. Shattered trust. Anna always believed that her marriage to Victor was strong. They had spent 15 years together, raised a son, and overcome many challenges, always holding hands. But what happened on that rainy evening forever changed her perception of love and loyalty. Victor often stayed late at work, and Anna never asked too many questions. He was an architect, projects took time, and business trips were routine. She was used to his busy schedule, but lately, he had become distant and distracted. Rare dates, a lack of affection, secret phone calls, all of it she attributed to stress. Until that fateful evening. She hadn't planned to check his phone. He had simply left it on the nightstand, and the screen lit up with a new message. One word, miss you, and Anna's heart clenched. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the phone. There were more messages, photos, promises of love. Her Victor, the man she had shared her life with, was pledging his devotion to another woman. When he came home, Anna was sitting in the dark living room. In her hands was the phone with the open messages. What is this? Her voice was cold, though inside, everything was screaming. Victor froze in the doorway. His face paled. He didn't try to deny the obvious. Anna, I can explain. Can you? She laughed bitterly. Will you tell me it was a mistake? That it means nothing?" He lowered his head. "It was unintentional. I got confused." "Confused?" Anna's voice broke. "You held her, kissed her, spent nights with her. That's not confusion, Victor. That's a choice." He stepped toward her, but she pulled away. "Anna, I love you. I was confused, but I don't want to lose you. You lost me the moment you chose her," she whispered. That night, Victor left. Anna remained alone in their shared home, surrounded by memories that now only brought pain. She didn't know if she would ever forgive him, but she knew one thing: trust, once shattered, never returns to its original form. Weeks passed. Victor called, texted, tried to see her. He begged for a chance, saying he had realized everything, that Anna was his one and only love. But each word of his echoed hollowly in her mind. Every morning, Anna woke up with a dull feeling of emptiness. The bedroom was too quiet. Victor had always been the first to wake up, brewing coffee, sometimes bringing her a cup in bed. Now that routine was gone, leaving behind silent mornings filled with bitterness. One day, he appeared at her door with a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite flowers. "Please, Anna, let me explain." His voice trembled. She looked at him for a long time. Once, those eyes had been a reflection of reliability, but now they held only regret. "Victor, love isn't words. Love is actions. You made your choice." He lowered his head, realizing he could no longer convince her. And it took a long time to heal. In the first days, she couldn't eat, sleep, or think about anything other than the pain. Then came the anger. How could he? How could he betray years of shared life, their son? But along with the anger came realization. She was stronger than she thought. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman who deserved better. She started changing her life, found a new job, bought a bicycle, signed up for painting classes, things she had dreamed of but always postponed. She was learning to smile again, learning not to think about him every second. The hardest part was explaining everything to their son. The boy asked questions Anna didn't want to answer. She didn't want him to see Victor in a different light, but the truth slowly seeped into their home, settling in every corner. One day, he looked at her and quietly asked, "Does Dad not love us anymore?" Anna hugged him and whispered, "Dad will always love you. Sometimes adults make mistakes." Months passed. Anna grew accustomed to solitude. It no longer frightened her. She enjoyed her morning coffee in silence, long walks, and reading before bed. She no longer waited for messages from Victor, no longer flinched at the sound of a ringing phone. One day, while strolling through the park, she saw him again. He was alone, thinner, older looking. Their eyes met, and he tried to smile. "You look wonderful," he said. "Thank you," she replied, and walked on without looking back. She no longer needed his words. She no longer needed him. And as Victor watched her walk away, he realized that he hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost the woman who had been his everything. And that was his greatest mistake. Story number 3. A Web of Lies. Nina always considered herself a faithful wife. She and Mark had been together for nearly 2 decades, building a life, raising their 2 children, and supporting each other through thick and thin. But sometimes, even the strongest bonds can be undone by a single thread of deceit. It started with small things: Mark coming home later than usual, excuses about work piling up, and a certain detachment in his voice. Nina dismissed it as stress, believing that life had simply become too demanding. But when she found a receipt for an expensive dinner for 2 on a night Mark claimed to have worked late, doubt crept in. She didn't confront him right away. Instead, she started paying closer attention. His phone, once casually left on the counter, was now locked and always in his pocket. He would step outside to take calls, his voice hushed. When she asked harmless questions about his day, his answers became vague, evasive. One evening, she decided to follow him. It felt absurd, like something out of a bad movie, but she needed to know. Mark had told her he was working late again, but instead of heading to the office, he drove across town to a small, upscale restaurant. Nina parked a safe distance away and watched as he entered. A few minutes later, a woman joined him at the table. Young, elegant, laughing too easily at his words. Nina sat frozen in the car, watching her husband of 18 years smile in a way she hadn't seen in years. Her heart pounded as betrayal took root deep inside her. She didn't confront him that night. She needed time to think. When he came home, she pretended to be asleep, her back turned to him in bed, her body rigid with anger and heartbreak. The next morning, as he kissed her cheek before leaving for work, she felt nothing but a cold void where her love for him used to be. Days passed. The weight of her knowledge became unbearable. She wanted to scream, to throw accusations, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on her. But she knew that once the truth was spoken, their life, as they knew it, would shatter. So, she waited, observing, gathering more pieces of the puzzle. Then, one evening, he left his phone unattended for the first time in weeks. A message flashed on the screen. "I miss you already." It was from her. Nina's hands trembled as she picked up the phone. What she saw made her stomach twist. Messages, long, passionate, filled with longing and affection. Photos, plans for weekends she had believed he'd spent on work trips. Proof of his betrayal, right there in her hands. She took a deep breath, placed the phone back exactly as it was, and made a decision. She wouldn't scream or beg. She would take control. The next morning, she left the house before he did. Instead of going to her usual routine, she went to a lawyer. Knowledge was power, and she intended to arm herself with as much of it as possible before facing him. She learned her options, asked questions, prepared for every possible reaction he might have. That night, she set the table for dinner as usual. Mark walked in, kissed her cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. "How was work?" she asked, her voice even. "Busy as always," he said, sitting down and loosening his tie. "Exhausting, really." She nodded. "I can imagine. Juggling a job, a marriage, and a mistress must be quite the challenge." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, she saw the panic, the guilt, the realization that his secret was no longer a secret. "Nina, don't," she interrupted, raising a hand. "I know everything. The dinners, the trips, the messages. I saw it all. So don't you dare sit there and pretend." Mark's face paled. "It wasn't what you think." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It never is it? But I don't care for your excuses, Mark. I just wanted to see if you'd finally be honest with me. And you failed." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Nina, please. I made a mistake. I love you." "Love?" she echoed, shaking her head. "Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't lie, cheat, and then come home and kiss the woman you betrayed like nothing happened." Tears welled in his eyes, but she felt no sympathy. Not anymore. She had cried enough for the both of them. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, but Nina stood firm. She moved out before he could beg her to stay, taking the kids with her. Mark tried, of course. Flowers, grand gestures, empty promises. He swore he'd change, that it had meant nothing, that he would do anything to fix what he had broken. But some things couldn't be fixed. Months passed. The pain dulled, replaced by a newfound strength she hadn't known she possessed. She started focusing on herself, her happiness, her dreams, the life she had put on hold for a marriage that had turned into a lie. One day, she ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked different, tired, aged. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look great," he said softly. "I feel great," she replied, meaning every word. And with that, she walked away, leaving him behind, just as he had once left her, in the shadows of his betrayal.